Hey friends, welcome to the Raising Boys and Girls podcast. I'm Sissy Goff.
And I'm David Thomas.
And I'm Melissa Trevathan.
And we're so glad you joined us for this conversation. Let's dive in.
Hey, David Thomas.
Hey, Sissy Goff.
Can I tell you something you did for me today?
Tell me.
You helped me have perspective.
How did I help you have perspective?
So when we walked into your office, which doubles as our podcast studio, thanks to an amazing table that Marcus, our engineer, helped us create, there is drilling happening downstairs. And I went to 10 immediately. Oh no, we can't record today. What are we going to do? It's not going to work. And you said,
we'll just tell them we've got drilling going on because Daystar is in the process of expanding, which is such a great thing.
Yes. It was so good. I mean, I really inside of myself felt anxious, and you helped calm me down by bringing perspective and reframing, which is something we talk about a lot.
We didn't even script that.
We didn't. It really just happened.
Look at us practicing right here. And you'll get to practice throughout this episode because we'll just be talking about thoughtful things, and then you'll hear this.
That's very true. Or you might hear Patches barking because it's her first day back in studio.
There you go. Barking, drilling. We'll all get to keep practicing perspective.
This is real life on this podcast. Okay, can I tell another real life story about perspective, which is what we're talking about today? Actually, why don't you give them a quick definition of perspective, and then I'm going to tell a story about it.
All right. So we talk about the milestone of perspective a bit like the pain scale in the ER. When the ER doc says to you, like, on a 1 to 10 scale, where's your pain today? And we know that we've got to be able to accurately describe our pain if a doctor was going to appropriately treat the pain. And we need to know the difference between a 2 and an 8. And so we're going to be talking about how do we help kids develop that muscle of perspective.
Drilling is a 2.
There you go.
So I had a really, what should I say, insightful experience with somebody who was struggling with perspective the other day, a kindergartner who shall not be named. And he started a new school, and on the playground, which we know kids often will talk to us about how lunchtime and the playground are the hardest parts of their day because there's not as much structure. And he was trying to navigate who to play with on the playground, and he asked somebody if they would play with them. And the other child said, no, I'm on my way to go do something different. And so he said, so I went and sat down by myself and thought of all the worst days I've ever had.
We're laughing with that kindergartner, not at that kindergartner.
That's exactly right. And of course I said, tell me what your worst days are you've ever had. And he said, when I accidentally knocked something over and when I got stuck in the mud with my puppy. And I thought, well, those are some great bad days. I wish mine were getting stuck in the mud, knocking something over I didn't mean to. And if we were going to rate those on a scale, we need to help this little guy find his way to a scale.
Yes, we do.
And I want to jump in and say, because we had a question on social media, somebody said, is it too late? Just this week. And we want to say in every milestone that we're talking about, it is never too late. And we'll actually talk about some ideas of things you can do with littles or bigs in your life. Either way.
Never too late.
So can you start off talking about the stumbling blocks for the fellas in our lives? Because I need to hear them. Obviously, someone not playing with you on the playground is a stumbling block. Might be for me too.
Well, I will start out, but there may be some moms listening who wish that I wouldn't start out today. Moms, I want you to hear me say first and foremost, I'm so on your team. You are amazing human beings, and you are so important in the lives of the boys you love. And think back, for those of you who listened to our last conversation about vocabulary, when I read that data from the APA, and we talked about some unique ways that we can approach how kids develop emotionally and socially on the front side. And you may remember me, Mom, saying that research tells us that from infancy through the school age years, moms are often working harder to control their son's emotional volatility. And one of the ways I think that can happen, and I talk about this in Are My Kids on Track, is through intervening and coddling. And you've heard Sissy and I in some previous seasons of the podcast talk about how we have observed in all the years of our work how easy I think it is for moms to be especially hard on their daughters and dads to be especially hard on their sons. And the reverse of that would be that I think it's easy sometimes moms to step in with too much support and intervening with the boys we love. And I think back on a story I told in the book of talking with a friend of mine years ago who was the only daughter of 4 siblings. And it didn't occur to her till she was an adult that her mom would make her brother's lunch and she had to make her own. And so thinking about all the different ways that I think it's just instinctive sometimes to do more for the boys we love. Now, it could certainly be there with girls as well, but I think let's just pay close attention. Let's all agree to pay close attention to that temptation, moms, to be harder on girls and to intervene more with boys, because we aren't helping him if we're doing too much of that in that space. And so we want to
Patches does not like that information.
No more talking about that, David. Stop it right now. So all I want to challenge you to do is just be thinking in the everyday of life with him right now. Like, where could I be jumping in with a lot of rescuing in ways that don't allow him to develop this important milestone of perspective? So,
David, I just finished a 5-day stay with my little nephews while their parents went on an anniversary trip. And feeding them at dinner time is so crazy. They're hangry creatures when they get home from school and want food 5 minutes ago. Guess who saved me during the visit?
who?
Nurture Life. I want to sing those words like Oprah does.
Well, I will let you.
Nurture Life is a meal delivery service focused on helping busy parents easily feed their babies and kids from 10 months old to 10 years old. The company provides fresh meals and snacks that are delicious, nutritious, and fully cooked. That means they are ready to serve in just 1 minute.
Nurture Life lets kids enjoy a healthy, nutritionally balanced diet while still eating all of their favorites like mac and cheese, spaghetti and meatballs, and so much more. So parents can be sure there's always something on the menu that their little ones will love.
What sets Nurture Life apart from other meal delivery services? Without a doubt, it's how amazing they taste and how healthy they are. It's because their meals are made fresh every week. Seriously, they're never frozen and shipped directly to your door. Henry loved the Presto Pesto ravioli, and I was sneaking in bites with every meal.
I support that.
With 5 back-to-back days and school starting up, I knew I needed some help in the kitchen. Nurture Life saved me a lot of stress. The meals arrived quickly, and each one was delicious and so easy to serve.
So how does Nurture Life work? It's simple. Select from over 50 varieties of nutritious, balanced meals on their weekly menu, from finger foods for babies and toddlers to kids' meals for older kids.
Then Nurture Life does the cooking for you, and the fresh meals are delivered straight to your door in refrigerated packaging. Nurture Life is my favorite meal delivery service because all the meals are designed by registered dietitians. So I'm giving the boys food that's good for them. That means I can focus on fun instead of worrying about what's for dinner.
Nurture Life's mission is to raise the standard for children's food in America, one meal and snack at a time. Along with full meal options, the Nurture Life menu includes on-the-go snacks and superfood smoothies so kids can eat well no matter what they're in the mood to eat.
It's about time that a flexible meal subscription existed for babies and kids. So head to nurturelife.com and use code RBG for 55% off your first order.
That's right, 55% off. Once again, that's nurturelife.com for 55% off, and make sure you use our promo code RBG so they know we sent you.
David, I can't count how many parents come up to us that are pregnant with their 3rd or 4th child. They are heroic for wanting to learn and grow. I wish we could give them free babysitting, a spa day, and a nap, but what we can do is to tell them about our sponsor, Needed.
Yes, it will help them feel more energy, mental clarity, and resilient through products that we've come to know and love from our friends at Needed.
There are a lot of options out there, but Needed is the brand we trust for nutrition products that support all stages of parenthood, from preconception to postpartum support and beyond.
They're backed by over 4,000 nutrition and health experts, including OBGYNs, midwives, and dietitians, and the brand really understands the unique needs of parents.
My favorite product right now is Needed's cognitive support.
Which, let's be truthful, we both need.
I've noticed better focus, attention, mental clarity, concentration, better ability to cope with stress, better energy since I started taking it. And we want that for you too. In fact, 92% of women taking cognitive support saw an improvement in overall cognitive function within 4 weeks. It is expertly designed by women for women.
Modern life can be stressful. Parenting is harder than it has ever been. Needed Stress Support is a clinical strength herbal blend to support your mood, energy, hormone balance, and overall well-being to help you feel and look your best. And they even have products specifically designed for dads too. I love their men's multi.
If you're looking for products that can optimally support your brain health, mood, energy, mental clarity, and replenish your nutrient stores after having one or more kids, check out Needed's comprehensive line of nutritional products.
Head over to thisisneeded.com and use code RBG for 20% off your first order. That's thisisneed.com and use code RBG for 20% off your first order. What do you want to say is a stumbling block for girls?
Well, before I say the one I want to talk about, I'm glad you talked about that in all 4 dynamics with parents and kids. And I want to say, moms, I do think it's worth talking about what happens with girls sometimes. And I think one of the stumbling blocks that I'm actually not going to talk about, but I would love for you to get a copy of Are My Kids on Track, because I talk about it in the book, is that often girls who feel like we're not hearing them will get bigger. So they'll lose perspective just to get us to hear them. That's not what I'm going to talk about right now. And so I would love for you to grab a copy of that because I think it's really important to talk about. The stumbling block I want to talk about, you're off the hook. And the culture is on the hook because, y'all, there are 2 really significant things going on with kids in general, but I think girls in particular. One is from a statistic standpoint, we have watched these trends of anxiety and depression really rise among kids, but especially among girls. We are seeing some great data all of a sudden that's going, maybe dropping some with depression, suicidality. Not anxiety yet from what I'm reading, but depression and suicidality. So that has been a very genuine phenomenon that kids have been struggling with. And I think as a result of that, what one girl said to me one time was, everyone in my school is anxious. And so then a group kind of jumped in and said, so nobody will listen to you if you use the word stressed. Nobody hears you unless you use these really big words. And so kids are no longer saying, and we talk about this a lot, I can't remember the last time I heard a child say what we would say when we wanted to get back at our parents, which is, I'm going to run away from home. They're not saying that anymore. Y'all know what they're saying. They're saying, I want to kill myself. I read a study from 7 years ago that was talking about depression in kids, and it said kids don't often use the word depressed. They use sad and stressed. And I would say I have not heard a child or adolescent use the word sad or stressed in 7 years. I mean, it has shifted to, I'm not sad, I'm depressed. I'm not worried or stressed. I have anxiety. There was a shift at some point, and I wish I knew the year, when I felt like all of a sudden girls were sitting in my office. I would say predominantly starting in middle school, but I think it was earlier than that. And I want you to tell your story about the little 8-year-old that you talked to, who were ticking off the characteristics of depression, even PTSD, to the degree that I thought, have they looked up the DSM, like the diagnostic manual that therapists would use to diagnose someone? Come to find out, back then they were Googling what was the diagnostic criteria for these different diagnoses, because I think there was a sense of, if I don't have a diagnosis, my emotions aren't valid. Not at home necessarily, but culturally and within my peers. You had a little girl.
I did. A little girl who came for her first appointment at Daystar, and I took her on a tour, as we do with kids when they come for their very first appointment. And she met some dogs, got her some popcorn. We sat down in my office, and I said, I just want to know a little more about why you're here. Tell me what you and your parents talked about. And just right out of the gate, she said, I have a lot of toxic relationships.
Isn't that amazing, y'all?
6 years old.
6. I thought
6 years old.
Wow.
And she had attached to that word.
Yes. And we do have kids as young as 8 who are talking about taking their own lives. And so y'all, I think it's a great conversation to have with your kids to say, what words do you think kids are using to describe emotions today? Because they know and they will say, and it can give you a great springboard to have some really healthy, important conversations with kids. Because that is the language that they're using so much of the time. And I think it shifted from Googling the diagnostic criteria to now they're using TikTok. And there are so many TikTok accounts where there are people that are trying to spread awareness about mental health issues. And kids are using those posts to diagnose themselves with any manner of diagnosis. And so we just need to be really aware of that, you all. And I think we need to be really aware of not only having conversations with that, but also the language that we're using. I had a family come in, and it was a mom of a 7th grader, and she said, I'm convinced that my daughter has RSD. And I said, I'm not familiar with that diagnosis. Can you let me know what that means? And she said, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Y'all, didn't you have rejection sensitivity dysphoria when you were in middle school? I sure did. And again, I think we're pathologizing sometimes ordinary emotions, which is dangerous for kids. They're pathologizing them with each other. I'm going to tell you a better story. We have a family we have worked with for a long time, both of us. And it's a really wise mom. And her daughter, I had been meeting with her for quite some time. And she was a kid who she's an Enneagram 2. So she was helping everybody else all the time. I think didn't probably feel real heard by some of her friends who were struggling a lot emotionally. So she needed big words to describe at the lunch table what was happening to her. She started using them with me, using diagnostic language, waiting for me, I think, to say, I think you're depressed. And I kept saying things like, oh, I can tell you're really hurting. I hate that it feels that way. So she got bigger and bigger. Then she moved on to, I think I need some medication, because I think she felt like I wasn't hearing her. And I think it's time that we talk to my mom. And so I said, okay, let's bring your mom in. I'd love for her to be a part of this conversation. And you all, this wise mom came in and sat down on the couch and put her arm around her daughter and had so much empathy in her face when her daughter started saying, Mom, I'm just really having a hard time and things are really bad. And I don't think anyone's hearing me. And I don't think you and Dad even know how bad things are. And her mom listened for a long time. And then she said, honey, I'm heartbroken over how sad you are. Oh, I hear that. I see that in you. I want something so different for you. And I remember the other day when I picked you up from school and you were laughing. And I remember watching you with some friends, and I could tell you were in a different place and you were having a lot of fun. And she said, honey, I know you have some really hard, sad, even dark moments right now. And when you're clinically depressed, the darkness stays. It doesn't lift. And so I think you are walking through some really deep sadness. And that's why we have Sissy in your life, for you to talk to about that. And I'm here for you anytime. But I don't want you to use something to define yourself that is only a temporary part of who you are. It's not a permanent part. And so let's not jump onto that word that obviously kids who walk through depression and anxiety, that's not a permanent part of who they are, but it's certainly a seasonal part. And I love that she used that language. And I think I want you to think about, if you're a parent listening, how can you be really empathetic with your kids so that they don't get bigger just to get you to hear them, but at the same time offer some real-time perspective. And let's talk about some of that in building blocks.
It's so great. Well, as we think on building blocks, as hard as it was to talk about the stumbling block, I'm really excited to talk about the building block because I have had so many parents who have employed this idea, you and I both have, that we have seen so much beautiful effectiveness of where this can create a great reset for us as parents and for kids. So I want us to be listening and leaning into these ideas, thinking not just about the kids we love, but about ourselves as well. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. So My building block I talk a lot about with boys is to give them a cue, some kind of visual cue. And it's in keeping with, you've heard me talk about boys are primarily visual, spatial, and experiential learners. So anytime we can come out of the auditory of doing a lot of lecturing and reminding and reprimanding and redirecting and move it into helping them make connections in those spaces with a visual cue, with an experiential opportunity, it's such a win. And so if you have a copy of Strong and Smart, I want you to go to page 29 in that workbook. And I walk boys through an understanding of the hand model of the brain, which I want all the credit to go to Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Payne Bryson. Go back and listen to our episode with Tina. It was fantastic. They wrote The Whole Brain Child, and they talk about and introduce this idea of the hand model of the brain, of helping kids understand the different ways that our brain works when big emotions come into the equation. So there's a thinking part of our brain and an emotional part of our brain, and how do we get those working together? And that's when we're regulated. And to use Dan and Tina's language, sometimes we flip our lid and we're not regulated in those moments. And how do we get back to that regulated state? So I put that in language that's really manageable for you to teach kids and even teenagers an understanding. And then we can use that as a visual cue with boys. So after we've taught that, after we've explained it, you might even want to have littles draw the shape of their hand on a piece of paper and color the thinking and feeling parts of the brain, and use that as a great visual tool as you're trying to help them make connections around this idea, and then using that at different points. And I have a hilarious mom of a teenage boy that every time she gives this, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can see my hands out. It's kind of that classic stop visual. She will sing Stop in the Name of Love. And I love that she's adding a little soundtrack to that. But she would say, if she were standing here, that she sometimes gives that cue back to herself. She's putting her palm in her own face and saying, why am I talking? That great acronym from the recovery community of wait, why am I talking? And that reminds her that right now there shouldn't be a lecture going on. There shouldn't even be consequences being given, because nobody in the house is regulated and has their thinking brain online to make good connections. So I have loved all the ways parents have talked about employing this building block. And you all heard me talk in the Ages and Sages season about how every developmental theorist would agree that 13 to 15 is the worst episode of a boy's life. And I could not begin to tell you the number of parents I have done consults with over the years who have a 13, 14, or 15-year-old son who are just in that harder stretch of parenting. And I have a delightful couple I meet with who have a 14-year-old son, and he will periodically, to what we talked about with a stumbling block, try to rope his mom into some coddling and intervening and doing too much. And it might turn into an argument, and the dad will stand behind the son. So he's looking at his mom. He can't see he's doing this, and he will hold up the number 14 with his fingers, like a 1 and a 4, as a reminder to his wife of this is a 14 moment right now. And we're not going to make any long-term determinations about who he's going to be, because this wonderful mom can slide into thinking, oh my goodness, what is he going to be like as an adult man? What kind of husband is he going to be? How's he going to operate in relationships? And the reality is, you've heard me say, I don't want to go down in history as who I was at 14. I think most of us don't. So we don't want to make long-term determinations. And that's a cue these parents are using with each other in different moments to give them perspective. Okay, we just got back from speaking in Dallas, and you brought Henry, your nephew. It was so much fun having him on the trip.
He had a ball, and we made some really sweet memories together. Speaking of which, we do that every time we build a KiwiCo project together. It's become one of our favorite things to do. Our newest project was a mechanical sweeper, which is a toy vacuum cleaner-like sweeper with multiple moving parts that can be used to pick up the 5,000 Legos around my house.
You do have a lot of Legos. I'm grateful KiwiCo is helping with the cleanup.
KiwiCo delivers seriously fun learning for kids of all ages through hands-on projects and activities.
With 9 monthly programs to choose from, KiwiCo has something for kids of all ages, ranging from infants and preschoolers to teens and beyond.
Each crate is designed by real experts and tested by kids to ensure that every experience is age-appropriate, engaging, and seriously fun. And I am blown away by how quality the materials are.
It can be hard to find creative ways to keep your children engaged, challenged, and off their screens. KiwiCo to the rescue.
Redefine learning with play. Explore projects that build confidence and problem-solving skills with KiwiCo.
Get 50% off your first month on any crate line at kiwico.com with promo code RBG.
That's 50% off your first month at kiwico.com, promo code RBG.
What's a building block you'd offer for girls?
I would say back to your ER pain scale. I love that. And it's something I use a lot in my office, to the degree that I started calling it a dramamometer with girls because it feels like that. But it is something, you talking about strong and smart. I have it in the book for elementary age girls, Braver, Stronger, Smarter. And I also have it in the book for middle and high school girls, Brave, because I think to introduce it even in a way that they can be really concrete with it can be super helpful. And so what I would do, if you have those books, it'll have a graphic with it. If you don't, you can talk it out with her. But to say, tell me what a 10 is in a calmer moment on your scale. And it can be an anxious scale. It can be an angry scale. It can be a sad scale. Different kids are going to lean different directions. I think a lot of girls early on are going to lean angry. As they get older and they're aware out of that great need to please that we talked about in our emotional vocabulary episode, it's going to shift into being more anxious and more angry at themselves. And so what is a 10 on your scale? And then let's talk about what would a 3 be? What would a 5 be? And I would say not even just a 10 would be losing a parent and a 3 would be a drill when I'm recording an important podcast episode, but to think about what is your reaction. What does a 3 reaction look like for you? Well, it looks like getting irritated, and 10 looks like falling apart, to help them conceptualize not just what happens, but also what does it feel like and what are my outward behaviors as a result of it. And a lot of times with a kid, we'll not only do a thermometer, which is how we rate it, but we'll have kids sometimes draw a volcano. And so with the volcano, as the lava is erupting, what causes it? What's their reaction? And then after you have conceptually talked about it, you pick your daughter up from school and she is totally melting down like it was a 10-day, and that you can start to listen with a whole lot of empathy, because we, again, always want to start there. And then to say, oh, honey, that sounds so hard. What number do you think it was on that scale that was in your Braver, Stronger, Smarter book? What number do you think it is on your thermometer? And then I can't tell y'all how many times I have kids say back to me, usually they're a little irritated with it, but they'll say, oh, you're right. It felt like a 10, but I guess it was a 6. And then that we still say, and a 6 is hard because we don't want them to feel like we're dismissing whatever they're feeling because they're putting it on a rating, which is what they'll often feel and why kids can push back against a scale. But to say, it's really going to help them, because we would say this whole idea of perspective is one of the most concerning shifts that we've seen in kids in certainly the last 3 decades, but probably the last 15 years.
Yes.
And so this feels like a really important milestone. Will you give a practical?
I'd love to
think about building it?
And I'm going to issue the disclaimer that's one I've talked about before, and I'm going to keep talking about because I believe in it so much, and I've seen it change the game for a lot of kids, for a lot of grownups as well. Mm-hmm. And that is creating a space. I just believe in it so strongly. I love how many schools have a calm down corner in the classroom, a feelings fort, a place where kids can go if they feel anxious before a timed test, if they had a frustrating exchange at recess, and they need to regulate and have a moment to reset before they come back into learning. And I wish every home had one as well. And I talk about it so much with boys because I've said before, and I'd say again, that often boys' emotions have a lot of a physicality to them. It's why toddler age boys tend to bite, hit, kick, throw, scream. It's why teenage boys tend to punch holes in drywall. But you would say plenty of girls have a lot of physicality to their
and can certainly
emotions.
use a space too.
Yes.
Any girl can. They just need different things in it with them.
And the objective being that if I have a place, hold on to that word, to go and regulate, I don't need a person to regulate on. And If we don't
Good.
create enough of a place, of course, they'll always be happy to use a person, a parent, a sibling, a friend in those moments, because we put this verse in Are My Kids on Track that we love. It's from Ezekiel 20 from the Message. It says, God is speaking about the Israelites in this passage and says, I seriously considered dumping my anger on them right there in the desert, but I thought better of it and acted out of who I was, not by what I felt. And I think
that's so good.
if we don't have a space, we're super tempted to act out of what we felt right there on whoever that person is that's in close enough proximity. So when we practice, and I think I've had so many parents say that space has been so beneficial for me because it's what helps me exit an emotional tug of war kind of moment that I'm having with a kid, or to step out of an argument. And if I say something like, I love you too much to argue, to then have a place to go to begin to regulate myself when they're trying to pull me back in. So I just think it has layers and layers of benefit.
Yes. And in Raising Emotionally Strong Boys, you have a specific blueprint for it, right?
I do. Thank you for reminding. I talk a lot about it in the book. And then again, if you've got Strong and Smart, go to page 20 in the workbook, because I've got a whole blueprint for how to create it. You can do a brainstorming activity of what to name this space that can be really fun, and some ideas of how to execute it. What about for a practical for girls?
Well, I love that you said that about schools, because I don't know if you remember this, but we spoke in California years ago, and these two amazing women from a school that now we've gotten to speak at multiple times came up and said I think she was at the time the assistant head of school, had a thermometer in her office, and she would talk with kids about where they were on the scale, which I love that in a school setting they would do that. So share that with the teachers in your life, the educators in your life. And I think, to your point about if they don't have a place, they'll find a person. We have talked so much about if kids don't have healthy coping strategies, you will become their coping strategy, because they don't want to do the hard work of going to these. And so that would be mine, which goes hand in hand with the space, is that they need coping strategies to use while they're in it. And I did a podcast with our friend Annie F. Downs yesterday, and she said, we were talking about being single for their Single Purpose League, which is such a cool thing. And she said, how do we stay away from negative coping strategies? And I said, find positive ones instead that fill you up. And I think the same is true for kids. It's true for us. It's true for kids. And so as we were writing this book, I asked a group of 8th and 9th grade girls what were healthy coping strategies for them. This is in the Are My Kids on Track book. I loved their list, and I want to read it to y'all because it's such good things for people of all ages. They didn't want to call it a coping skills list. They wanted to call it their Don't Worry, Be Happies.
That's great.
So these are theirs. Good things for you to remember, to talk about with your kids. And in fact, after you listen to this list, we would recommend really practically around the dinner table tonight, I want everyone in your family to come up with 10 things that you can do to come back down from 10. So here are theirs. Listen to music, talk to yourself reassuringly, journal, read, talk to group or youth group, watch a TV show, talk to a friend or family member, text someone you trust. These are obviously older kids. Help someone else with something they're having issues with. Yes. Look at photos, which we talk with kids about having a gratitude album they can scroll through. Go for a walk or run. I love that they knew that. Sing, write a song. Surround yourself with positive influences. Cry into a soft, fuzzy blanket. Play with your dog. Watch funny videos. Draw. Take pictures of nature. Take a nap. Organize your closet. Dance it out. Take a bath. Watch a funny movie. Go to church. Memorize Bible verses or quotes. Write quotes and verses in a book and then read over them. I loved that one. Read a devotional. Read old letters people have written you that encourage you. Paint your nails. Hug something or someone. Think of people you love. Think about what number your anxiety is on a big picture scale. I love that they included that. And make a thankful list. And that would be certainly a good place to end, that it always grounds us. Gratitude always grounds us. It sure shifts me in my thinking.
Me too.
Okay.
Listen how quiet it is as we finish out our interview. See, just that good
Grateful.
reminder that the hard things always pass, don't they?
Amen. David, what a team we have that we get to call friends who help make this podcast possible.
Amanda Young, our operations manager.
Chris Starrett, our engineer and producer.
Our management team at KCH.
And we are thrilled to be a part of the That Sounds Fun network.
Our music was created by the insanely talented Dave Haywood of Lady A.
And if this podcast felt helpful to you, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, all the things.
We are grateful for you and cheering you on always.